Hey everybody, Matt Johnston here, and I'm back with another legislative update. So before we get started, I really would appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button that's down below. Just click the little bell, you'll get notifications when we post some new content. But also be sure to pass this along to your friends. So today I'm going to be talking about the PRO Act, which is a piece of legislation that is currently making its way through Congress. This act had previously been proposed in the previous Congress, but failed to get through the Senate. The bill will get through the House, most assuredly, but it is also an open question whether or not it will get through the Senate. Under current Senate filibuster rules, it probably wouldn't happen, but there is a move afoot to remove the filibuster, things of that nature. So I don't want to get into the political side of things. I want to stick with the actual legislation. There's two parts to this legislation that I think could very well affect small businesses. The first one of those is the joint employer rule. Under the joint employer standard, there are situations in which two or more employers could be jointly responsible for the same employees. Basically, you're jointly responsible with the other employer if there are violations of, for example, labor laws, the National Labor Relations Act, or wage and hour laws, or workplace safety and things of that nature. Now, this particular one is a big concern because if a company employs a subcontractor, an actual subcontracting company that also has employees, under certain circumstances, you could be responsible for the failures of your subcontractor. So let's say you are a plumbing company and you decide you want to hire a new company to help build your new website. And they do all kinds of cool stuff, fancy stuff, but it turns out that your subcontractor was not paying its staff correctly. So not paying the website designers correctly. You could, in theory, be held liable for that. Now that may be too much of a separation between your business and another business, but let's say you're a plumbing company and you are awarded a construction job and you're going to be working on a large building and you simply don't have the staff to service your current customers and do this construction. So you hire some companies to do your servicing of your other customers or some construction. And it turns out that this other company that you hired to help fails to follow the labor laws. You could be liable under this joint employer standard. It's an open question of whether or not how the liability would work, but essentially an employee who was subject to violations of labor law would be able to sue all of their joint employers for violations of the labor laws, even if the main contracting company was not responsible, did not do anything, and had nothing to do with how the other subcontracting business operated their business. You could still be considered a joint employer and therefore liable. It is a very, very expensive standard. I'm not saying that businesses shouldn't be responsible for their behavior, and that you should be very careful about who you are doing business with. But by the same token, people who are working on contracts and subcontractors and things like that, the whole purpose is to get work done, not to increase liability and increase risk. But the big one that I want to talk about under the PRO Act is worker reclassification. Primarily, this is a question dealing with how a subcontractor is classified. One of the biggest question marks that small businesses often face is whether or not a person who's doing work for you can be a 1099 subcontractor, freelancer, or an employee. Now, as a general rule, the government considers anybody working for another company to be an employee. And you can then, there's various tests that are available that would determine whether or not somebody should be classified as an employee or whether they could be classified as an independent contractor. This is particularly worrisome if you are a freelancer or if you have a regular hiring of freelancers as part of your work. There are certain exceptions, but if you hire freelancers to do work for you, this is something that you need to be aware of. Now, the ABC test is basically, this is how it works. The worker is free from the control and direction of the hiring company in connection with the work's performance, both under the contract and actually in fact. So you can't have a contract that says, well, you're an independent contractor, and then treat that person like an employee. It really doesn't work that way. That person is an employee. Number two, and this is the big one, the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. Okay? And the third prong is the worker is customarily engaged in an established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as the work performed. So basically, they have a business and they've been doing the same kind of work for a while. The second prong is really going to be the hard one. Now, let's say you are an HVAC company and you hire a company to maintain your vehicles. Okay, so you go out and you work on air conditioning, heating, venting, that sort of stuff. But you hire a person, a freelancer, to come in and repair your company vehicles. Or you take them to another garage to have that work. That is outside the usual course of business. But let's say you are a magazine and you hire a writer, to a freelancer, to write an article or write a series of articles. Under the ABC test, that freelance writer is not a contractor. They're not a freelancer. They are an employee because they perform work that is within the usual course of the hiring entity's business. Now, for those of you who followed the news, California in October, the late fall of 2019, passed what is known as AB5, which is essentially what the PRO Act is built on. And AB5 essentially ruined the freelance writing industry. It ruined a few other industries as well, because it said that the ABC test is how we are going to determine whether or not somebody is a contractor or not, for all purposes. And the PRO Act would do the same. Now, I represent a lot of small business owners, and I represent a not insubstantial number of freelancers and people who are consultants, people who want to do the kind of work and they want to be independent. Fewer than 10% of independent contractors and freelancers out there want to be considered employees, and freelancing provides a lot of flexibility. But if you are a small business owner who often uses freelance workers to supplement your workforce on an occasional basis, or you happen to be a freelancer who loves to do what they do, this is not a piece of legislation that is going to be very friendly to you. So I encourage everyone to take a look at the legislation. I'm going to put a link to the bill down below. And you can also, there's also a wide variety of advocacy groups that are being formed, both formal and informal, to try and prevent the passage of this piece of legislation. Normally, I wouldn't get too political, but I would also encourage you to contact your senators to tell them not to do away with the filibuster. Because if they do, this is one of the first pieces of legislation that will be passed under a filibuster-free structure in the Senate. We can have conversations about that if you'd like, but the PRO Act is not something that I think small business owners want to have in place, and I'm pretty sure most freelancers don't want to have it in place either. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call us. Be sure you hit the subscribe button. It's right up here. And here's another link to some other videos where you can check out some of our other content. In the meantime, have a great week, and I'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.